Okay, next we're going to move on to our special speaker, and his name is Larry Singer. And when they contacted him to write an introduction, he came back with this introduction, which I thought was great. Larry is this really cool guy and has this really cool story, and he's going to tell you the rest. So here you are, Larry Singer.
I started writing an introduction. I said, wait a second, that's going to be my speech. So let me just have her say I'm a cool guy. Can everybody see me? Can everybody hear me? We're good? All right, so my name is Larry Singer. That's Psi-D after my name. I have my doctorate in clinical psychology. And let's make a deal. I realize it's going to be a long and arduous day. We're apparently already having a pretty strenuous morning with raffles and breakfast. And you have, let's see, raffles coming up, trivia, bingo, best in team competition. Rough work, you guys. I feel your pain. And I'm actually what sits between you and getting lunch. So here's the deal. I sit here and talk, you sit down there and listen, and no one goes hungry. I guarantee you that. So first I'd like to thank the selection committee for choosing me, and Barb Madison actually for nominating me and having the confidence in me to be able to do this. I mean, we've known each other a long time, and she knows pretty much what I'm capable of. Also, I think you're all to be thanked and commended for the service you provide to the population of people with disabilities that you serve. It's a great job. So, I'd like to talk to you about a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I'd like to talk to you about luck. No, I didn't just win the lottery, trust me. If I did it, I'd bust out there chartering us to the Bahamas, and we'd have lunch there. I didn't encounter luck quick on the way or find a four-leaf clover. The luck I'm talking about is what happened to me on August 31st, 1988. It was on that night that my life took, by the way, I really don't move that much. I'm not like a Tony Robbins kind of speaker. Can I just sit here? Is that cool? I'm not comfortable with that kind of thing. It was on that night that my life took a 180-degree turn and went from being an able-bodied 19-year-old average student at UCI, meandering his way in and out of classes, to being that same 19-year-old, stumbling towards life this time. It was on that night that a hit and driver, the motorist, struck the truck in which I was a passenger in. Our truck flipped over 3 times, and in the process split my head open. My neck was crushed at the cervical 5th vertebrae, with 4th and 6th also affected. I lost a lot of blood and I had to have 67 blood transfusions to replenish it all. I was immediately knocked unconscious and I was in coma for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. When the ambulance came, they probably would have deemed me dead were it not for the 3 breaths a minute that were keeping me alive. I was rushed to the nearest trauma center, which was Michigan Community Hospital in Mission Viejo. The trauma team were secured that night and worked on me all night. Enough to resuscitate me and launch me into the next phase of my life, which is living with a severe disability. Well, I was in intensive care for 3 months, of which nothing in my life had prepared me up to that point. This wasn't just a hospital stay to recover from, it was a minor malady. It was initially the doctors and the medical staff fighting to keep me alive, and then me fighting for my life, assessing my life up to that point, assessing my current state, and having absolutely no idea what my future would hold, if there would be a future. There were a parade of strangers coming in and out of my room wearing any number of a pink or blue or white smock. This was my room, right? With all manner of clipboards and medical instruments poking and prodding me, many of them having no communication with me whatsoever. The only sounds in the room being the bleeps and bloops and bips of medical equipment keeping me alive. I was there to heal. They were there to do the job, got them their paycheck to put food on the table and pay the rent. Lucky, you say? Listen on. Shortly after I regained consciousness, one of my first innocent questions to my mom, and this is me and my mom right there, and I've got my halo brace on, laying in a bed looking like death warmed over. She's pretty happy because her son's alive. One of my first innocent questions to her was, where am I? My mom gently looked at me, grasped my hand and fought back tears, as I'm doing now, and broke the news to me. You're in a hospital. You were in a very bad accident. Without skipping a beat, I looked at her and said, I can't be here. I gotta be in class. I was at UCI. I was in between my sophomore and junior years. I'd actually chosen biological sciences as my major. I was in the pre-med track to become a doctor. In retrospect, for the wrong reasons. There's a picture of the sign in front of UCI. The wrong reasons were, my girlfriend at the time was in the same major. There's a picture of a guy and a girl, with a guy with his arm around the girl. Doctors made a lot of money. Big pile of cash. And I can make my Jewish mother very, very happy. The typical Jewish mother reprimanding their son for something they did. Well, needless to say, med school was out. It was kind of a no-brainer though. My pathetic grade performance in the core classes would prompt any med school student, any med school, to not even waste money on a stamp to send a rejection letter. Anyway, we got my report card. Biological Sciences 101, C. Physics, D. Chemistry, F. There was one glimmer of hope in my transcript though. I did great in psychology. Now it appeared in psychology A+. And yes, I did get an A+, I did the extra credit. Before the summer began, I had spoken with an advisor in the psychology department about switching majors. We had the change of major request form all filled out. I had the great idea of first taking 2 summer school classes in psychology to kind of get my feet wet in the psychology field. And I hadn't turned in the change of major request form. I had 2 weeks left in the second class when the accident happened and derailed me for about a year. And derail is kind of an innocent term. So medical school and brain surgery were now officially off the table. I still had a lot of work ahead of me to even determine if school was still on the table. My mind was always focused on it, but the question was, could the body follow? Everything was difficult to determine because in the hospital at that time, in intensive care, everything was in flux. Over a short period of a few months, my prognosis went from, we don't know how long he's going to be in that coma, to he's going to be brain injured for the rest of his life, to he'll have no quality of life, to, all right, so he's going to need a 24-hour caregiver and he'll have difficulty returning to school, to, all right, he's never going to lead a normal life again. Well, while the experts were wrong about most everything, they hit the bullseye on one thing. Thank God I'm not going to be normal. There's a picture of me laying in the hospital bed, and I've got a big, well, you can't see this color, but it's a big rainbow tie, and a little gold tinfoil hat, my head shaved, with a big smile on my face. Of course, if anyone of you can come to me after this and tell me what normal life is, then I'd be able to compare and contrast. And quite honestly, if normal is what they say it is, I don't want a normal life. This slide says, I've always wanted to be normal, but lately I've had a strong suspicion that this is it. That's written by Jay Skinner. Initially, believe it or not, I was actually opposed to psychology as a major. I thought it would be too obvious a choice for somebody in a wheelchair. I mean, come on. There's not a lot of activity in there. You're just sitting there talking to somebody, right? How easy would that be? Well, who was I fooling though? My backup idea of an occupation, bricklayer, wasn't really in the cards, so I kind of gave in. Besides, I had experienced a very traumatic and life-altering experience, so why not use it to help somebody? So I returned back to school now, abnormal and all. And this is when my relationship with the Department of Rehabilitation began. At first, I really didn't know who they were, except just another one of those government agencies that was in my life now. Sandy Fake was my first counselor. We discussed my vague goal of becoming a therapist and continuing at UCI. At the time, I kind of felt like my choice of school wasn't really popular with the department. You get a great education at community college, right? And my career goal was not pretty popular because it was kind of vague. But the fact that I only had 2 years left seemed to convince Sandy that she could sign on to that. Because it was only 2 years, right? Little did she know who she was. I had spoken to graduate school, but that bridge would be crossed when I got there. Well, the first stop, after getting out of rehab hospital, was finishing off that summer school class I had not finished off. I was warned by the professionals about the difficulty of returning to school with my physical limitations and, oh my God, these neurological abilities that are compromised, or at least how they determine my neurological abilities to be. However, I triumphed with an A in that class. I knew I was ready. Now, this wasn't just a matter of returning back to school. My only experience of attending UCI at that point was driving myself to school, walking myself between classes, sitting in any open seat in the classroom I wanted to, taking my own notes, and being an otherwise invisible, normal student. And let's not forget the days of rolling out of bed 30 minutes before class, wearing the clothes that I slept in, slipping on some flip-flops, gargling some mouthwash and spritzing on cologne as my hygiene for the day, and grabbing a bagel from the counter so I could spend 15 minutes going through the parking lot trying to find a parking space and sitting down in the classroom in any space I wanted to before the professor appeared. No, returning to school with a disability required a seismic shift in my routine and my mindset. Previously, the main worries I had about going to school were finding a parking space to get to class on time, studying just hard enough to pass a test with a C, and juggling my work and my busy social life, which social life takes precedence. The disability introduced all new worries to my life. I needed help getting ready in the morning, and then getting to school, so I was dependent on others and their schedules. The campus was built pre-ADA, so the question is, would I have an accessible path of travel to and from classes to get there in the allotted 10 minutes between classes? Will there be someone there to open up the doors for me? They didn't have a lot of open automatic door openers. What happens if my chair breaks down? What happens if the battery dies in my chair? Traveling between classes in the rain, how am I going to do that? I'm going to get drenched. How will I get my urinary drainage bag emptied? I mean, it's going to need to be emptied. What happens if I have an involuntary bowel accident, or God forbid, the dreaded common catheter leaks? Well, I'm not one to care about what other people think about me. Are those people staring at me? Did I mention the constant threats hanging over my head like a sword of Damocles? Bladder infections and pressure sores, no matter how much care is taken to avoid them, could happen at any time, at any moment. And then the autonomic dysreflexia, if you know about that, it's not that much fun. That could accompany them, could be devastating, if not life-threatening. And no, don't worry, I'm not having paranoid ideation. All of those things have happened to me, and more. My most important tool, I feel, besides my tenacity and resiliency, was the support I had. My family had provided tremendous support for me in going back to school, each one chipping in their part to get me through each day. I also had some good friends already established at the school, and my outgoing personality helped me make new friends very easily. I learned how to best utilize disability student services. Note-taking assistance and test-taking assistance really helped out. I got time and a half for tests. Yes! And also, I found that teachers, administrators, and school staff were very sympathetic with my situation, for lack of a better word. I had a vantage point, access to teachers and administrators that normal students, yes, they were normal, didn't have. I could be in a large class of 150 students, all the way up in the top in the shadows, and ask a question. While the teacher didn't address anybody by their name the whole term, he answered my question by, well, I'll tell you, Larry. So through my schooling and through life, I have found this recognition advantage to be an asset, for the most part. Sometimes it can be a detriment, but that's why I try and be on my best behavior, because a first impression is a lasting impression. Well, I think I left my mark on UCI. Since it was built in the 60s, you can imagine the lack of access in many areas of the campus. My first year back, I found out what worked and what didn't work, and discovered how I could make the most of the campus for my education. In my second year, I was actually chosen as the Disability Awareness Commissioner. I proposed to the committee members that we put on an awareness event. I'd encountered some new barriers and a new construction in the student center. And in my discussions with the staff member that helped me out to get away from the problem, and he just so happened to be in charge of the student center, we had talked about maybe putting on an event at the student center that could help raise campus awareness of students with disabilities. Well, it took a lot of planning, but we had a week-long event, and we gave administrators of the campus a disability for a day to see how they can do their job having a disability. We had a disability fair in front of the student center demonstrating services available to the students with disabilities. Actually, I think we had Department of Rehabilitation there, talking about what the Department of Rehabilitation does. And we also had a luncheon with campus policymakers, showing them a slideshow, pointing out different problems that people face with disabilities on campus. We don't know who knows how much of an impact we had, but I do know when I visit the campus, it's a lot easier to navigate. Well, when I was doing my bachelor's, Department of Rehabilitation fulfilled their responsibility of getting me a bachelor's. Now time for a job, right? But I wasn't through with my goal. Right, Sandy?
Right.
I wanted to go further. My case was kept open because I wasn't employed, but graduate school would be my responsibility. So this picture was really cool. The day after graduation, we opened up the Los Angeles Times, and in the front of the Orange County section, there's a picture of me and two of my psychology student friends. And the interesting thing about this picture, they could have gone for the sympathy factor and shown him a wheelchair. You can't even tell I'm in a wheelchair. Well, with the help of loans, I journeyed into my first year at Pepperdine. This is the Irvine Pepperdine campus. And I found a completely different situation than UCI. These were small, intimate classes, fellow students who were adult professionals in coursework that was actually related to what I would be doing after I got my degree. And quite honestly, I sailed through my coursework and got great grades. I proudly sent Sandy my grades every term. Call her up, did you get my grades? Get my grades today? And a miracle happened my second year. And Sandy told me the department could actually help me finish my master's. Well, it took me a year and a term more, and I completed my master's degree. Well, I attempted to acquire my hours for the MFCC license, Branch Family Child Counselor license, but I found that to be a daunting task. My hours depended on clients first being assigned to me and then showing up. And that was always inconsistent. Well, I decided to go for my doctorate as I figured there would be more options available to me with a doctorate. Well, before I entered that program, I acquired a service dog. I just figured it was one of the perks I could have as a person with disabilities. And here's a picture of my dog, Hawk. This is actually 2 days after we met, or maybe 3 days after we met in training. He's a beautiful black Labrador. And he's up on my lap, and we're just having a great time. What I found, besides he was pretty good at retrieving dropped items, granted, usually they were covered in dog slide and bite marks, was he actually made me more approachable for other people. Before I had the dog, people would just stare and not say anything. But having the dog gave them a reason to come and start talking to me. And actually, he went through the full doctoral program, and while I got my PsyD, which is a doctor of psychology, I like to say he got his PhD. Pretty hairy dog. There's a really cute picture of us kissing. And on the lips. Yes. So there's Hawk and I, the second after we got our degrees at the graduation from, it was Alliance International University, which actually used to be known as United States International University. Well, towards the end of the program, I got my own van, which was a tremendous help in getting my internship hours. Unfortunately, with the van came mechanical difficulties, and we'll just say this one had many ghosts in the machine. I would tell you the nickname we had it, but I wasn't told that I could use colorful language here. We'll just call it a red van. And then, 1999 came. I finished all my schoolwork. I'd yet to complete my dissertation, but that year, I developed a pressure sore that knocked me out of commission for a year. It required a 3-month hospital stay, along with many months of at-home bed rest. This wasn't conducive to any schoolwork. Months of hospital stay and many more months of bed rest later, my sore was finally healed, believe it or not, through no help of the hospital, but actually the internet. In my opinion, the internet's one of the great equalizing tools for people with disabilities. This is back in the day when we were dialing up for a connection. And having very little hope of expedient healing, I searched the internet and I found a magic healing method. And if anyone is interested in what it was, don't bother. It's no longer available. They couldn't get third-party reimbursement, probably because it was so effective that the billion-dollar medical product lobby prevented it. So, this was 9 months of my life wasted. Before I was admitted to the hospital, I was right on the edge of finishing my doctorate. I was ABD, which is all the dissertation. I thought it would be great. I could do all sorts of research since I wouldn't have any distractions. I'd be laying in bed and I'd have to work. Instead, I caught up on all the soap operas. Well, after healing, I made a feeble attempt at starting the dissertation. But this is kind of sad, but what really got me motivated was, of all things, 9/11. In my twisted logic, watching the towers burn, I was worried that the world would mass destruct before I got my doctorate, so I better get it. I labored, but I finished. And this is me and Hawk, and I made one of those Lucy boots, you know, the psychiatrist is in. Well, I changed the psychological help 5 cents, the doctor is in. Well, you might think now I'm qualified for a high-paid job, right? But finishing my postdoc hours and passing my licensing exam still the way it did. Hours were near next to impossible to collect using public transportation. Getting my own vehicle helped speed things along when it worked. Over the years, there have been numerous we'll call them situations. Along the way, I experienced debilitating health issues, some hospitalizing me for months. And some of the van issues involved accidents, which grabbed me for months and years at a time. Relying on public transportation for work settings proves to be a difficult, if not impossible task. Sometimes I would spend a quarter of my day hunting down buses and traveling home. So, the big question is, what has helped me along this 28-year path with all these ups and downs? What has gotten me from point A to point B? And I am, and I've always been, staunchly resilient. And this picture is a bunch of nails, and on top of it, it says resilience. I actually had no other choice. Often people will say to me that they have no idea what they would do if what happened to me happened to them. And all I can say is, they wouldn't know until it happened to them. Well, before I was injured, I had a good attitude, which probably never got noticed because I was just an average person. So, let's talk about resilience. How can my story help you as a service provider? Well, resilience is not something you can buy, even though they have names like Sure and keep you smelling nice all day. Resiliency is not a deodorant that you can spray on. The picture of a lady spraying on Sure deodorant. I've got some extra stored away and I wish I could bottle it. I could make a lot of money. As it turns out, my worst quality as a child actually became the quality that got me through the worst time of my life and continued to this day. My family used to complain all the time if I was stubborn. Who else is stubborn here? Come on, hands. Stubborn? Don't be so stubborn. Let's see those hands. Well, I have you all beat because my family told me that I was the stubbornest kid in the world. Well, as I grew older, the stubbornness morphed into resilience. This good attitude followed me along in my hospital stays to the point that when they rolled me on a gurney to my rehabilitation hospital after spending 3 months in intensive care, I was wearing the halo brace on my head, and they saw the smile on my face and the laugh in my voice, and the immediate thought on their mind was denial. There's a picture of a guy in a desert with his head in the sand. I refused to let the disability stop me. I refused to be told I couldn't do something. I refused to accept the limitations that I was told that I would have. You can't be without a 24-hour caregiver. You can't return back to school. You can't have an active life. You can't drive. You can't. I said, I don't want to be told what I can't do. Tell me what I can do. My family knows that if they want to get me to do something, all they have to do is tell me I can't do it. I don't remember if I heard this somewhere. I just kind of figured out things on my own. But let's just say there's 1,000 people, 1,000 things that a person can do. You agree on that? 1,000 things you can do. Now that I'm a quadriplegic, there's only 600 I can do. Instead of sitting around being miserable about the 400 I can't do, I'm going to go out and do the 600 I can do and be the best possible one. So how do you teach somebody resilience? How do you make someone resilient? Well, it's not a teachable skill per se, but as a service provider, you can help facilitate it. Then once you create an environment to foster resilience, you go from being just a service provider doing their job and earning their paycheck to put food on the table to having a long-lasting and life-changing effect on your consumer. And by the way, resiliency, also known by its other names, tenacity and perseverance, could potentially reap great rewards. For instance, my unwillingness to be told that since I can't spin the wheel, I can't be a contestant on the show, scored me a contestant slot on Wheel of Fortune. There's a picture of me on Wheel of Fortune. And I was the first contestant on Wheel of Fortune to be allowed to have an assistant spin the wheel for them. So there's me and my brother next to me. And I solved that puzzle and won $1,000 if I were a rich man, but that was it. Got myself a camera from it. So I've got this list that will probably help you in your quest to provide your consumers with resilience. I adapted it from Kenneth Ginsburg. He's a resiliency researcher. He calls it the 7 C's, the fundamental building blocks of resiliency. His theory actually centers on young people, but I feel this can be applied to anyone in any situation. You can even apply it to your consumers to facilitate their success. And I'll demonstrate how I use it. The first C is confidence. When consumers try things and succeed, they can feel a sense of achievement. We can undermine competence when we don't allow them to recover themselves after a fall. Well, had I allowed others to discourage me from getting back into school, because it would be difficult, I would never have achieved all that I have in my education. And what if I fail? Well, I'll get back up and try again. There's still a bricklayer occupation. The next C is confidence. Consumers need confidence to be able to navigate the world, think outside the box, and recover from challenges. Well, in that initial time, it was very important for me to have my independence. I had never been alone for the first 9 months, 10 months, 11 months. Well, I decided to assert myself by taking an opportunity a few weeks before school started to be sure that I'd be able to go between classes on time. So while on campus, I thought to myself, well, gee, while I'm here, I'm going to want to get something to eat. And believe it or not, up to that point, I never actually eaten a meal by myself, that I procured by myself, that I set up by myself, and that I fed myself. I wouldn't want to have to rely on a friend or a stranger to get my food. I've got pride. So I thought to myself, what would be the easiest thing to eat? Pizza. Pick it up and eat it. So I went across the street, I ordered a couple slices, and they heated it up. They brought the plate to me, and I was so excited I was doing this on my own. I took a piece of pizza, I put it in my hand, I took the first bite. It's hot, real hot. They just had it in the oven. So I sat there and waited for it to cool down. Piece of pizza right there. Waited a bit, tested it, no, it's still too hot. Waited a bit longer, it's just right. I ate the pizza. Then I ate the second, and there I was done my first triumphant solo meal. When it was done, I rode back across to the campus, and I saw a friend that I hadn't seen in a long time. I started talking to him and telling him how excited I am. I'm coming back to school. It's going to be great. And God, I got all sorts of great plans. And I looked at my fingers, and there were 3 blisters as big as marbles. Apparently, the pizza was too hot for my mouth, but I couldn't feel that on my paralyzed hand. So I learned my lesson from that. So in this one simple episode, I experienced all 3 aspects of confidence. First, I was discovering how best to navigate the new campus I was going to be going back to. I was able to think outside the box and how I'd be able to eat independently. And I had to recover and move on from those blisters on my hand. Then we have connection. Connections with other people, groups, and communities offer consumers the security that allows them to stand on their own and develop creative solutions. Well, I connected with other students with disabilities and disability services. I had a ready pool of connections at the campus radio station where I was working before the accident, and I was coming back to work after. I made new friends, there were new people, made new friends in classes, and there were outside organizations such as Irvine Residents with Disabilities, I live in Irvine, and Dale McIntosh Center, which gave me more connections in the community. Then there's character. Character is built when consumers have a clear sense of right and wrong and a commitment to integrity. People with disabilities face questions of right and wrong, and they're made to fight for what they're entitled to. Occasionally, people with disabilities are put in a moral quandary. If they approach a resolution with integrity, their character can become stronger. Contribution, that's the fifth C. And when consumers contribute to the well-being of others, they receive gratitude and feel useful and productive in turn. In turn, this feeling can make them more easily turn to others and do so without shame. Well, ever since becoming disabled, I've involved myself in one way or another with giving back to the community, whether it be through raising awareness, participating in disability advocacy, giving guest presentations to groups like this, or working in the nonprofit settings that I am affiliated with. And in return, when I need help, I know I've done my part and I can receive without shame. And then coping. When consumers possess a variety of healthy coping skills, they'll be less likely to feel helpless and depressed and or turn to dangerous quick fixes such as drugs or alcohol when stressed. Well, my life has been littered with situations that seem insurmountable. And my effective coping skills have prevented me from going off the deep end. There's a guy in a padded cell with a straitjacket on. And then control. Consumers may feel a certain degree of being out of control. Any way they can feel more in control would help their sense of being, which helps foster resilience. When I was first interned, I learned the harsh reality of being paralyzed from, at that point, the neck down. I had no use of my hands, no use of my legs, no bowel or bladder control. I had breathing machines controlling my respiration. I had no control of the food I was eating because initially it came in via tubes. And then, when I was eating solids, sure, I could choose what I wanted to eat, but I was being fed breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And therefore, I had no control over how I was eating it. And you all know you're very particular about how you eat, right? Damn it, doesn't anyone know? You take the spoon, you dip it in the mashed potatoes, then you dip that in the peas, get the peas on the spud, and then you dip that in the gravy, right? That's how you eat mashed potatoes. Now, can you imagine how frustrating 3 meals a day were? Did I mention the inconsistent state of my health changing at the beep of a hospital machine? At this time, laying in my hospital paralyzed from the neck down, my head locked into halo brakes. About all the control I had was to twitching my nose, to try and eradicate the face itches that were plaguing me, which were completely out of my control. I didn't even have control of my emotions, as I would cry at the drop of a hat, and this were tears of joy of being alive, actually. I'd see somebody, and I'd just be so happy, I'd just be overwhelmed with tears. And then, I was released out in the mean, cruel, uncontrollable world. So here I was, returned back to school, yet juggling with dealing with inconsistent health, uncontrollable bodily functions, social service agencies, dependence on others, navigating the world that still had 1 year to be mandated to be accessible. You can imagine how out of control I felt. Like I said, I had supportive parents, but I couldn't have them do everything for me. And actually, one of the greatest things I did for myself was to insist on my independence over things that I could control. My mantra, while family members were doing things for me that I was able to do myself, was, if I wanted that done, I would have done it. That was my way of resting whatever control I had left available to me. At my current workplace, which is the Santa Ana Public Library, and I heard you guys talking about WIOLA this morning, we're using the Ginsberg program to create an environment which fosters resilience in our students. And we actually have a group of students that are taking place in the WIOLA, and we use it to give them life skills to be able to handle the stresses that they encounter in their life. A sense of control can be the difference between someone succeeding or lapsing into a state of depression and learned helplessness. Learned helplessness, as I imagine some of you may know, was a concept developed by the researcher Martin Seligman as an explanation for why people stay in undesirable situations, even when there's a way to escape. He placed a dog, this is a dog, and there's Sullivan, a stick figure Sullivan, in a no-escape situation. The dog was constantly shocked. And after attempts made in vain to escape, he couldn't escape because there was no way out. He just sat there and shuddered and took the shocks. And then when he was placed in a new box, and this is the new box, and you see there's a side that the dog can go over to, that's the safe side with no shocks, the dog would just sit there on the side and take the pain because they just sat there and they were used to it. That's learned helplessness, and that happens. There are numerous forces in which your consumers are made to suffer in the no-escape side of life. Health issues that seem insurmountable. I sat and shuddered in a hospital bed like a shocked dog in 1999 when the doctor told me that pressure sore that I mentioned earlier was not healing and could take months, maybe years, to heal. And the only way to heal was to stay in bed laying down, at which point I can't do anything. I'm pretty much useless. Well, my resiliency kicked into overdrive and I started writing letters trying to find help. I wrote a letter in vain to a newly entered Christopher Reeve. There he is, Christopher Reeve, Superman. And every agency I found affiliated with him, he was going to get people to walk, but I was trying to urge him to see about maybe giving some attention to dire need to come up with some effective techniques for pressure sore treatment because, well, we're not going to walk if we're stuck in the middle of pressure sores. Pressure sore treatment protocol was still in the dark ages. Well, my letter writing was an exercise of futility as nothing came from it. And as an ironic aside and a sad aside, he died from complications from pressure sores a few years later. Well, having no luck with that, I ramped up my search and I actually found that miracle treatment that healed me. And it was about a quarter of the time that I'd spent already. Well, I was confronted with another no-escape situation when I developed another sore, this one in 2013. And I'm being told now that I would not be able to sit for an extended period of time, ever again. Well, instead of sitting in this no-escape box, I got resourceful and I found a miracle cushion that gives me the confidence that my butt is probably being looked at here. I'm sitting on it right now, and it moves around at all times, so I'm not getting too much pressure on one area, and it prevents pressure sores from happening. I continually face insurmountable struggles in other situations, such as problems with my van, situations with caregivers. I was once told by a neuropsychologist that it was doubtful that I could successfully finish a doctorate. Well, can you imagine how I felt a year into my doctorate program being told that? Add to that just all the regular life stresses that seem like they never end, and dealing with social service agency conflicts. Now we can exempt Department of Rehabilitation from that list, right? Because they never turn people down for anything, right? Right? You can just imagine the learned helplessness that becomes embedded in one's psyche. So, in addition to resiliency, I had a few tools in my tool belt to help me with my recovery to adjusting to my new life. Again, I'll tell you, I had support. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of support. I had an incredible family that rose to the occasion, helped me through the struggle, and are still supportive to this day. Along the way, I met the woman who would become the love of my life. And this picture was actually taken an hour and 11 minutes after we met. You can just tell the love, right? If you can, I'll show you. So there's me and the woman, and we're just staring fondly into each other's eyes, an hour and 11 minutes after meeting. And she's been a great support to me and a partner. Patience. Patience is definitely needed when having to deal with healthcare providers and social service agency timelines. I'm sure you guys know all about that, right? Of course, being a strong self-advocate, which is another necessary tool, well, that helps ensure that I don't fall through the cracks and I'm able to fight for what I'm entitled to. And then, adaptability. One of my strongest tools is my ability to look at my world and decide what limitations are in accessing my world independently. And if the solution isn't readily available, I adapt and figure it out. You may notice these things on my arms and wonder what they are. These are two braces. They're called Margaret braces. And they have little pokers attached to them, and I've been tapping on my keyboard and using my iPad with them. When I was released from the rehabilitation hospital, I was given a primitive form of these braces to help me with things like feeding myself and typing. And over the years, I've realized how important they are to me, and I've improved on the original design, updating them when touchscreens came around so that I could use those. Well, these are the difference between the things that I can and I cannot do. A larger part of the world has opened up for me, and I give a huge amount of credit to them, getting me through my bachelor's, getting me through my master's, and getting me through my doctorate. Personally, I love to develop these and see everyone with limited or no hand function use them, but that takes minor details like money and industrial design experience, which I don't have. Well, let's not forget and give credit to the incredible assistance from my Department of Rehabilitation counselors. First, Sandy Fagan. I knew her when she was just Sandra. Just a counselor. I think I was one of your first, was I one of your first cases? One of her first cases, now look at her. And then Barb Addison, cameraman. Each were extremely helpful and caring, which made my time in the department, we'll say bearable. That's a good word. It wasn't always smooth, but I had great allies in Sandy and Barb. Particularly Barb, with whom I continually stretched the boundaries of her training at every turn. Sometimes she had to go to the nether region of the training manual to figure out how to help with whatever was going on. Barb and I got to know each other very well. Relationships I had with other government agents and service providers were bland, boring, and superficial. Barb was a friend, a confidant, an ally, and an advocate. This is definitely a strong factor in my ultimate success. Our relationship actually got to the level that I could call her, and when she answered, I could say, hey. And depending on the tone of my hey, she knew either, guess what was coming, which was, hey, or, hey, followed by, so you know nothing ever simply goes from point A to point B to point C in my life, right? To be followed whatever the latest dragon in my life was needing to be slayed. This relationship was extremely important to my success. Having Barb's support helps me feel more in control. Sorry, Barb, I feel like I'm giving the master toast to your retirement. So you've all been sitting here on pins and needles, either wondering, when is he going to tell us about luck? Or, when is he going to finish so I can get some lunch? Well, if you're in the latter camp, don't worry, it's going to be soon. If you're in the former, though, you're in luck, I'll tell you. When I got out of the hospital, my parents were my caregivers. They were helping with all manner of care and bodily functions that should have ended when I was potty trained at 3 or 4 years old, not 19 years old. One night while caring for me, they had 2020 playing on the TV in the background, and 2020 was doing an expose on the disabled orphans that were in some third world country. My mom, after seeing the poor conditions these disabled orphans live in, said to me, "You're so lucky to have us, Larry. If you lived there, they would have thrown you in one of these orphanages." Well, me never missed an opportunity to play on irony. I looked down at my naked body. I looked at my parents tending to their 19-year-old's naked body. And I stared at the ceiling and said, talk about luck. That's also my stock response when people, after hearing my story, tell me I'm lucky to be alive. Well, yes, I am lucky, but I'd say it's some pretty hard-earned luck. I mean, I don't want to discount my strong will and determination. However, it would have been easy just to lose momentum for everything and just sit at home and collect my benefits. I mean, I was allowed to, I had the excuse. But this is never the way I wanted to live my life. So I picked up the pieces after this happened and moved on to the next thing. My credo was, don't tell me what I can't do, tell me what I can do. And if you can't, then I'm going to go figure it out and I'll come back and show you how to do it. Well, so every few years, I send out an anniversary email on August 31st, which is the day of the accident, to update my contacts on what's going on in my life. At the end of the email, I give the recipient something to think about, something to ponder, and I'll share it with you. I ask you all to do this exercise. You can do it just this once. You can do it every now and then. Heck, if you want, you can do it daily. It will help you gain a better appreciation of life. I'm going to ask you to take 15 seconds. That's all. Now, these 15 seconds, I want you to think about all the things that are great in your life. All the wonderful people in your life, all the things you can do and are blessed to be able to do. Why 15 seconds, you say? But Larry, 15 seconds, it's not enough time. I mean, I need more time, 15 minutes, 15 hours. I got a lot of great things in my life. Well, I chose 15 seconds for a reason. That's because I estimated that 15 seconds was all the time passed from the first impact of the hit-and-run driver to the truck finally settling in its upside-down state off the side of the road. It was 15 seconds that my entire life completely changed and would never be the same if it hadn't ended that night. I'd have a choice for more time. So once you're able to do this, you can talk about life. Ready? Go. Talk about life. In this picture is a bowl with a bunch of Larry from Three Stooges, his head, and then you see my head superimposed and it says, life is a bowl full of Larrys. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. We really enjoyed that. I think he needs another round of applause.